Thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Welcome to the program. It is an honor to welcome back Dr. Judith Reisman, who is one of America's penultimate experts on the sexual revolution. She wrote the key book about Kinsey and his horrendous and phony research that led to not only the reduction of sexual mores in this country and in the world, but also were used for legal arguments to make that legal and to codify that. She's the author of many, many books on this topic and is widely respected in this field. Uh, so, Judith, what is going on with you and your latest research?
Well, Chuck, one of the things that I came across it's within the last, I guess, 6, 8 months, was a Look magazine article from 1951, which, a lot of those magazines did have Kinsey on the front cover. That wasn't news. I hadn't seen this Look magazine article ever, however, and I thought I'd seen them all. So I started going through it. Yes, they make a comment, not they, Deutsch, Albert Deutsch, who was a very important guy in terms of creating the mental health encyclopedia or some such thing at the time, the human mental health. Deutsch was very enamored of Kinsey, of course, and he wrote this art. This was a two-part article. One came a month before. This was the second part. Not only did he admit in this article that Kinsey had over 200 little boys in his, quote, research, but he said the exciting new thing is he's working with a group of scientists from University of Columbia, which is heavily, of course, supported by Rockefeller. This is in 1951. The article comes out. So he was doing this in 46, 47, just after the war, just after World War II, for your young people there when we say the war. Yeah, World War II.
You mean the big one?
Yeah, the big one. Just afterwards. And the most important thing, he was working with this group of scientists with no name, who they were, right? No name, anonymous scientists, called the Greystone Associates, Columbia Greystone Associates. And they were going into the mental health hospitals, which at that time, if anybody has any memory or any historical knowledge, was not a place you wanted to be.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. They would throw all kinds of folks into those places, whether or not there was anything wrong with them. And if there was nothing wrong with them when they went in, they would surely be messed up by the time they got out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and these were centers of available victims, where scientists could go into those centers and they could do what they will, do what thou wilt. Yeah. Yeah. And nobody was going to tell them anything. And a lot of them were the scientists who were brought over here via paperclip.
Sure, the former Nazi scientists. That's right.
Former, well, the
former
ones who
and probably not so former.
No, yeah, the ones who were, sort of transitorily, Americana, right? But they changed their names because this was all part of the CIA. This was all, and so it turns out that Kinsey is the only person that's named in this group because Deutsch let the cat out of the bag and did say that Kinsey was part of it. And Kinsey wrote about what they were doing, and in the female book in 1953,
Mm-hmm.
which
It's amazing to me that how much these types of Nazis that
I
were
was mostly focused on the kids, but this turns out that he was really writing about what he was doing and what he was supposed to be doing for the CIA, for MK Ultra, for those out there who know anything about our history.
right.
MK Ultra being a CIA established program which absolutely destroyed human beings right and left,
Oh
gave,
yeah, and by the way,
LSD.
that's not even controversial. That was revealed in the late 1970s during the church committee hearings.
Right.
All of that came out. The assassinations, the LSD, Dr. Jolyon West and his LSD experiments, Ram Dass,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those people who were introducing LSD and other drugs, psychotropic drugs, on the street. Um, Judith, and also just
Yeah.
briefly, it's interesting to me how the Nazi scientists, people that were sort of similar to Mengele, they all pretty much
Yeah.
got off scot free. I mean, Mengele, the only reason he was caught was because he was so highly visible that he was exposed. But his mentor, von Verscher,
Mm.
nothing. He got a slap on the wrist, went right back to work. He retired at his university in Munster, I think it was. And the rest of them pretty much it was all swept under the rug. Everything was sanitized. As you mentioned, they came to the United States and changed their names, and they just continued on a pace, which tells you that there must have been some more than casual connection between these Nazi scientists and the OSS, which eventually would become the CIA, not to mention the Soviets, which took their share of them as well. And that this whole agenda, by putting Kinsey up front as the poster boy on the cover of the magazines, is this kind of given this image of this wholesome American man,
Mm.
with a bow tie and the crew cut, right?
You're right.
They promoted him like a can of peas. I mean, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
real. And then he would interview, and he was diddling 2-year-old boys. He was interviewing
Months, two
prostitutes.
months, 2 months,
Months old,
two
thank you.
months was the youngest.
Yep,
But there were 2 year olds too.
and he was interviewing prostitutes and prisoners, and then taking surveys and holding this research up and saying, "This is America. This is mainstream. These are what people want, and this is what people really are doing." And that this was accepted as science mainly because of the backing by the Rockefellers, who had influence over those big publications and magazines like Life and Time. These are big. I mean, in their day, they had huge influence. When they put someone on the cover, that was like, that was an endorsement. I mean, that was a good housekeeping seal of approval. And thus they mainstreamed sexual immorality in this country, uh, and continued to do it. So my question to you, Dr. Reisman, is why? What were they trying to achieve here by undermining sexual mores that had existed and that we had achieved over millennia? Really, I mean, why did they want to normalize all of it?
Well, first, Kinsey's role in that research was to give people, allegedly, that's what the report was, sex surveys before they were lobotomized. They would be lobotomized. They would have a portion of their brain,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
yeah, removed. The important, well, I say the important portion, but rational thinking. So before they were lobotomized and made into uh, robots, right? And then after they were lobotomized, he and his team, his team, because he had a large team there at Greystone, at Parkland Hospital, which had a huge, and by the way, I just wrote a paper about it. Yeah, it'll be out at some point. It had a huge children's ward.
Oh. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And we're not saying that the children were exemplar, excluded from the lobotomies. No, that's not what we're
How
saying.
did they get parents to agree to that?
Well, you're talking about kids who are already institutionalized.
Hmm.
So I know there's one case we that I talk about a lot. Well, there are two, but one case, a Karen Wetmore, who had been raped as a child when she was very young and never talked about it to anybody. And so it caused her enormous anxiety and depression. And her loving parents, I mean, they were loving parents, took her naturally to their family doctor. And he said, well, after a while, we better have her institutionalized. This was in Vermont, pristine Vermont. Right.
Right. I mean, they meant well. They bought a whole bill of
Yes.
goods. Right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they did. They meant well, really.
Sure.
They thought these professionals, these experts, will find out what's wrong with our little daughter. Well, those experts chained her to the floor naked as a jaybird, I mean, brutalized her beyond description. She was in and out of this after that, these institutions, for about 7 years, I suppose it was. I have to go back and figure it out again, but the point is, when she finally emerged, damaged beyond belief, uh, she sought therapy. She did meet a really excellent therapist who helped her find out what had happened. And she went back and got, through the FOIA, through the, information, let's see, federal, what is it again? FOIA, federal,
Federal information. Yeah. The release of
right.
classified documents.
Yeah. So through that, she finally, it took her 30 years, I think she said, or 32 years. She got her medical records because, of course, they guarded those with like gold, platinum,
Of course.
because, yeah, they didn't want that out. So she got her medical records, and she's in a lot of, I say a lot, but several video documentaries on MK Ultra, where she documents they were trying to give her epileptic shocks. The stronger the shock, the better. They would shock her more if she didn't have enough of an
Oh yeah.
epileptic fit.
I think doesn't that still go on? The shock therapy. I mean, I think it was cut back maybe around the early '70s. Lobotomy was also cut back in the early '70s. But my understanding is that this is still a
Yeah,
practice.
it comes and goes. Peter Bregan, Dr. Peter Bregan.
Hmm.
I did a show with him the this year. He's got his own YouTube channel, and
Yes.
I urge everybody to go to that channel. You should have him on your,
Oh, I thank you. Yep.
yeah, Dr. Peter Bregan. He Bregan heard about little black kids being singled out for these
Oh,
lobotomies.
I don't doubt that at all. I mean, we know about this Tuskegee experiments. That's
Yeah,
just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure this is why you find that often black people, and rightfully, don't trust medicine. They don't trust doctors. You had
yeah.
Margaret
Well,
Sanger with her Negro Project back in the '30s. I mean, blacks were used as experiment as guinea pigs by this establishment. And when you talk about the horror show about this little girl, that's just you have no reason to assume that that's not just something that
well,
wouldn't happen
that's what
all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So he fought it, and he got action against these brain, shock treatments that people were getting, and it was making them crazy if they weren't before, certainly. And so he fought that with who I think who was oh he was working with Pat Buchanan, but I think also a Kennedy, one of the Kennedys. I'm not sure. I don't remember quite
Right.
well.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
anyway, So they snagged it. They destroyed the whole industry for a period of time.
Right.
But anything that is profitable, yeah, will come back.
We'll come
And of
back.
course, the best example of current profitability is transgender, where you cut and paste body parts. The pharmaceutical
Yeah.
industry is making a fortune from transgender, which has gone up from 0, I think, or per year 1 or something,
Yeah.
to
Now
about
it's
200, or now it's going to I just
right, and it's happening to children who are not
yeah,
consensual,
sure,
and it's being
absolutely.
marketed as something that gives someone some kind of a psychological relief, which is at best unproven.
Oh, it's bunk,
Yep.
absolutely bunk. So, I mean, you don't do that. You don't experiment on children. You don't. How do you experiment on children?
I
You
mean,
have
I
to
don't understand how that could help anyone. I mean, to
know
you
it's
want to put
impossible.
on a dress, fine, but I mean, to actually remove your genitals, I mean,
Yeah, well, impossible, impossible. I mean, look, all this, the change, all the effort to give us vaccines. Well, the vaccine was supposed to take 40 years. You have 2 generations
yeah.
before you approved a vaccine. That was way back in the old days. All right.
Hmm.
So then they shortened it to 20 years. All right. So you think a vaccine, you take a vaccine, and they say that it's okay. Well, it's all very well and good as an adult if you don't get any reactions. That doesn't tell you anything about its reproductive effects, the next generation. And we have had massive increases in autism and in pediatric diabetes, and off the charts in asthma. This is from a second and a third generation. That's what you have to have in order to say this vaccine is okay. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. So the point is about Kinsey. He was in there doing these experiments with these children,
Right.
and nobody, absolutely nobody, was going to talk about it. No, no. The nurses wouldn't.
We didn't find out about it until your research,
Yeah,
Judith,
yeah.
which
Which
was
is
many, many decades later. Were you
which
able to
ama-
uncover this?
which amazes Look, I talked on the phone to Hobbs, Dr. Hobbs, who had criticized Kinsey. He was one of the well, it was one of the guys who was the head of the statistical association. He said, he said this doesn't make any sense, and he criticized the statistics and so on, but he didn't say anything about the children. And I
Hmm.
called him one day and I said, I don't get it. How come you gave criticism about all these other aspects of this guy's research experiments, right? And you didn't say anything about the children. And he said, I have no idea. He said, I cannot believe now that I look back on it, because
Hmm.
I told him, look, there it is, page 180, 181.
Right.
Look, page 160. He said, I can't believe it. When I look back on it, it was staring me in the face. But okay, but we were so naive. See, I mean, I'm so much older than you, and I can tell you that generation was a very trusting and very naive generation.
Right. You tended to believe the doctor in the white smock. And
Well,
and there he is at the University of Indiana in Bloomington, this cornbread place with is in the middle of the Midwest, where they still have the Kinsey Institute, and it's still
yeah,
under lock and key, and it
yeah.
is the largest collection of pornography in the world, and no one can
Well,
see it.
and they got at least $21 million in financing. I don't know what they're getting now, but
And that was pretty big money back then. Never mind
oh my,
now.
tripled,
Yeah.
quadrupled that, if you figure. And not only did they have that, but right now they have what's called the Kinsey app. I say it's the #1 center for sex trafficking, the
Oh,
number
oh, yeah.
one found fount for sex trafficking, because the Kinsey app continues what Kinsey was doing, and it goes out to the entire world, and you can go on your phone and get this Kinsey app, and you can become a citizen scientist as you rape your child or the next door
Oh my
neighbor.
God. I don't
All
even
you
feel
know,
comfortable mentioning it on the show. I mean,
well, I
you
mean,
know, it's
but
hard. What?
there's got to be some police action on this. Of course, all our police are busy getting themselves shot at and
Yeah.
stoned and
Trying to stop people from looting black neighborhoods and burning
yeah,
black businesses.
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, here we have the Kinsey app and we have the Kinsey report, and they're still rolling in dough over there, still promoting a loosening of sexual standards in this country and in this world, as if this is some
Destruction of sexual
destruction,
standards.
as if this is somehow a virtue. Um, I asked earlier, Judith, why? Why would our establishment want to do this? Why would the Rockefeller family want to do this? What is their
World
end?
order.
What is
World
okay?
order. It's a new world order. They want complete control. Look, it's not that hard to believe. I mean, there are every society historically, every civilization, there's been some guy that comes to power. He has 5 kids, 5 or 6, not kids, boys, men, or even 12. Kill them all off because one of them is going to succeed. He wants power. New world order. We have a quote, a whole bunch of quotes in my paper on the desire for a new world order expressed by Bush himself, right?
Right. That's right. He said it many times in his first speech when he became president, Bush Senior.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so Judith, I mean, that makes sense to me. It's power, and the best
yeah.
way to achieve and centralize power, besides scaring the crap out of all of us with this virus and make us become like prisoners in our own home, and we're with the medical, martial law, which is never going to end. By the way, they're going to come up with another excuse. Uh, you have a devolution of sexual mores. In other words, the standards that took humankind millennia to develop, going all the way back to the days of the Bible, which go to the proper types of relationships we
Yeah,
want to have and not have,
yeah,
that has all been thrown out because you want people to be weakened. You want to weaken
yes,
their will to become independent, sovereign people. They want to, when you surrender to the purient interests, to the darker side of human nature, and which people do, but the problem here is when you hold that up as a virtue, when you say, "Oh, that this is, it's okay,"
go
then
have a
it
good time. It's
yeah,
nothing gonna hurt.
exactly. Everything, whatever feels good is good. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter what you do. It's the ancient Greek Epicurean school. Whatever feels good is right. Everything is in the now. Everything is the sensate. There's nothing. There's no future. There's no past. There's no responsibility. There's no. Everything is what is happening in your experience, and that this is going to weaken people's resolve to resist, as you say, the new world order. This is going to leave the people who are fully conscious of what they're doing
they're
in a
gonna
greater
vote. They're
position of
gonna
power.
vote. They want to vote out the, Trump, because they think it's good that police are
Yeah.
being stomped on and murdered, and little people are losing their businesses everywhere because they're being burnt out. They think this is a good, they enough people have come to the point where they believe this, because remember, this is almost 3 generations of training, through our schools. This didn't happen. I mean, who had enormous control over the schools? The Rockefeller Foundation. Yeah. And the Carnegie
Going
Foundation.
all the way back, exactly. This is because they understood that the best way to control people and people's minds is to start out when they're children. This
Right.
goes back to Marx's manifesto, where he actually says in one of the planks, control the minds of the children and you will control the future. And that's
Everybody is.
exactly what goes on
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Charlotte Iserbit's done the best work on that. You
On
should.
education. Oh, yeah, I've had her on. She's great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
she's
Deborah DeGroff has done her all has those
she's
books.
amazing. I had her on already, and thank you. You recommended it
Yeah,
to me.
I mean her books, oh my gosh. Here. No, I don't have it. Yes,
Yeah,
I
and
do.
of course, I mean, my one of my mentors, probably my mentor, the late Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld,
Oh
was
gosh.
was we did hundreds of hours of radio together. They're precious,
Yeah.
and he, really got me on the right path in terms of understanding and
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff, and beginning to sort of debug myself from all the misconceptions that I've always had, because we all have them. We don't know
Yeah.
what's going on.
No, no,
So
no. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, the New World
so
Order.
here we are. We've got people having surgeries to change their sexual organs. We have, a society that is blurring the lines between what is male and what is female, as if
We have men putting wigs on or putting their hair in braids or something and going out and winning major of
yeah.
events and getting scholarships because
Whatever happened to
they're
women?
women.
Whatever happened to feminism? By the way, whatever happened to women's sports and the woman's sacredness of the woman's locker room? Quite frankly,
Huh?
I mean, that's no longer a virtue. Now it's all, you can be whatever you want to be at any moment, because you say you are, you are. You can decide, you can go back and forth, you can change this day. You have people who say they change several times a day,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
that this is all, and we're to believe this and accept this as science. And by the way, science is not on their side on this one. That's for
not
sure.
at all. Oh gosh. Yeah,
So
yeah.
now I'm being told that that there was enormous numbers of young babies who are born with elements of both genders. Now, look, I understand that this happens. It's called. There's a word for it. I can't remember it, but
Yeah,
it,
yeah. It starts with
we
an H. I don't remember now.
probably best we don't mention it anyway. But
Yeah.
the point is that it happens. It's always happened. But usually, in the case like that, the parents observe the baby and they try to figure out whether it leans male or female. And once they make that observation, they then go with that. That's the moral thing to do in a case like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what was done before John Money of Johns Hopkins and Fred Berlin, who's still at Johns Hopkins. And Fred Berlin, by the way, who keynoted one of the pedophile organization's events, yeah, keynoted that event. Before You Act was which is where you could go as a pedophile and get advanced credit, university credit for being a social worker. You got it, because you went to the.
Well, the whole business. I mean, now we're being told that children who are changed as infants, that this is abuse, this is wrong, and that there are now people who are bringing lawsuits about that, is my understanding. But as
Oh,
far as pedophilia goes, Tim Constantine, who's a radio host that I have enormous respect for, I heard him say that pedophilia will be normalized within the next 5 to 6 years. And I looked into it and I found out that he's absolutely right, that there are already conferences being held, and that the strategy is going to be to claim that pedophilia is an orientation as
yeah,
opposed to as a perversion.
yeah.
And once you say something is an orientation, you're saying that the person who has this so-called orientation can't do anything about it. They can't help it. So we should feel somehow sorry for them and we should respect their rights.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's the strategy that we're going to be seeing coming down
Well,
the pike in the next couple of years.
1976, 1976, I attended a pedophile conference in Wales, UK, United Kingdom. Yeah. It was called Love and Attraction. No, yeah, yeah, Love and Attraction. The Fifth World. No, that was something else. Anyway, but this one was Love and Attraction, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended that conference and I gave a paper there And that's where I met what I called the academic pedophile lobby. We aren't calling them pedophiles anymore. We're calling them pedosadists. Pedosadists. Because, pedophile means, or pedophilia, love of child. Well,
Good point.
parents love their children, for
Yeah.
goodness sake, hopefully.
Call
Yeah,
it better yet, pedopsychopaths. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
anybody who wants to commit a sexual act on a child, that's the most evil thing. I mean, that's to
yeah.
actually, damage the innocence of a child
Hmm.
is. I mean, the whole basis of a moral society is to protect the innocence of children.
Yeah, yeah. Because
For
they have
somebody,
to carry on your society. How do you
right?
expect to carry on the society when you had a mass number of your children have been so abused? And they are, by the way, daily, daily.
Has there been an uptick in this, Judith? I mean, you do
Oh, yeah,
research.
enormous. You have to have Lori Handrahan on your show. She
Okay.
wrote Epidemic, let's see, the America's Trade in Child Rape Epidemic. And she goes into the data. She's been collecting data on that because, we don't have any, since we don't have any governmental institution that is collecting data reliably on what's been happening to our children, and so distributing that as these data as um, up or down, trend or not trend. You have to remember, I didn't know this, but when I was doing my research for the Department of Justice in those years back in 82, 83, when I was doing my research for them, I started trying to look up what was the rate of rape of children. Yeah. And what I found was that all the FBI statistics, all the Department of Justice statistics started at age 12. They had eliminated any of the information,
Oh, that's terrible.
but they had it in the old days.
Mm.
But about 1957, 58, they eliminated all the information on children under 12 who were being sexually assaulted, raped, whatever. Well, what that meant was you could not do any trend data from this point to that point. And what we started hearing was, oh, it's so much better now, you know, uh, we've lowered the rape rate. Well, yeah, if as you claim, which I didn't believe anyway, that you lowered the rape rate of women, well, has there been a correspondingly higher rape rate of children, of babies, yeah, at the same time? Well, we wouldn't
Okay.
know that
No,
because
exactly.
all those data were removed.
Sounds like the way they've removed a lot of the COVID-19 data too. I
Yeah,
mean, a
there's
lot.
nothing new. Yeah, there's nothing new
It's
here.
all
Nothing new.
manipulated by people who have an agenda. So you have to ask yourself, what is that agenda? And I think in that case, it's the same agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it
So
is the new world
it's world
order.
control. I mean, what could be more controlling than the way they've approached the virus? It's unprecedented, and they're not going to stop. I don't think that now they're saying, not to get into another subject, but there's now quotes from Bill Gates and from some others that even if they find a vaccine, putting aside whether or not one should have a vaccine like that, so rushed into production, it's still not going to be over because it has to do with global warming. In other words, we're never,
I
yeah,
didn't hear that one.
oh yeah, we're never going to see the end of it. We are
Yeah,
never because they're not going to relinquish the kind of incredible control that they now have, and people are getting used to it. People are
yeah,
getting used to the idea
yeah,
that they
yeah,
have to cover their face when they go outside, even though it does nothing, and that they have to be fearful. And this every night of the big media ramps up hysteria and fear. I get the fact that there are more people being diagnosed with the virus, but the fact is that that's because they're doing more testing, and 99% of these people, it's asymptomatic. They'd never know they even had it.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and people like me and people who have a pre-existing condition, you have to take responsibility.
yeah,
You shelter, fine. But even in that case, it's the we were supposed to get over the curb. That already happened last April. It's over. It's no longer, spiking. And yet
Well,
we're going to continue with this thing, certainly through the election and probably beyond.
the thing that I was shocked to see was a actual picture photograph in the New York Times,
Yeah.
of Bill Gates standing directly next to Epstein, Jeffrey, in his fancy mansion, years after Jeffrey was known even to the common guy down the street, much
Oh,
less
yeah.
to
We were talking about, conservative radio was talking about this 10 years ago.
yeah.
I mean, everybody,
And he is hobnobbing, with with this criminal who's at best trafficking with young girls,
right,
who
at best.
places knows what he's doing.
Well, who
Really.
knows what he was doing? And
Yeah.
and it was a blackmail operation anyway, because he had his whole mansion bugged with cameras, and
Oh, of course.
he was
Of course.
connected to
Well,
intelligence.
that's another thing that we were finding out about Kinsey and blackmail and Hefner and blackmail and the CIA. The CIA was involved with also with Kinsey and also with Hugh Hefner. Yeah. I mean, you would have, of course, they would be. I mean, they had this
Yep.
thing, Midnight Climax, which they, admit to, where they had the guy, watching and doing sex scenes and, special rooms and special. Okay, but they would go. There would be a real problem if they started admitting that these central places like Hefner. Are you kidding? Hefner had cameras in every room, in every way.
Plus, he had all these tunnels. Not to mention.
Yes. And of course, all that went through to the CIA. Dulles was having himself a ball. Playboy magazine had scores of articles on the CIA, on Dulles. Nice, friendly articles, really. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whitewashing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Kinsey, of course. Kinsey would be the ultimate. He had
patron saint.
And he had the data, he had the pictures, he had everything of all these very important people. There was a comment that his buddy and his sex partner on occasion, except that he got too old for Kinsey. Kinsey liked him young and hunky, real hunky guys. He liked hunky guys. So there was a comment that Pomeroy made. Kinsey loved secrets because he could blackmail anybody at any time with what he knew.
Yeah, it's very troubling, and that's look, it's an age-old story. I mean, this isn't new, but oftentimes when you get people who are up in power, whether it be in government or in business, there's something on them. They're,
Oh my gosh!
Right? I mean, they're ambitious. They're willing to cut a few corners to get to that place, and they're willing to play ball. And there's a few things that people have on them so that they can manipulate what they do once they're in power. I mean, that's an old story. I mean, that goes back to King David. I mean, that's that's how power operates.
It's every civilization, civilization. I mean, slavery, it's just like slavery. Every civilization has had slavery. There's nothing new about slavery.
Exactly.
And blacks enslaved blacks, Poles enslaved Poles. Jews, well, they weren't allowed to enslave Jews, but anyway, they were enslaving. Well, actually, Muhammad said, you're not supposed to enslave fellow Muslims. So everybody sort of had a thing where
that's why they went into Africa.
Yeah, so they had all these African, slaves and Irish slaves and French and Italian. I mean, if you had a war, either you killed them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you weren't going to kill them, and take the women as whatever, but whatever, and children, or you use them as slaves.
That was the rules of war back then.
That would be us.
Yeah,
That would be
that's
us.
exactly how it happened.
You know, I mean, I don't know how you'd work out, but I wouldn't work out too well. I'm too old, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. They get rid of anyone who's a useless eater.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Anyway,
so here we are with the advancing sexual revolution. Um, we've talked about how they didn't care about the causes of AIDS. They were willing to let 100,000 gay men die, which was unnecessary. All they had to do was come out and show some leadership and
oh yeah,
explain what caused AIDS, and not to do that until they found a cure, at least.
and
But
close
closed
down
down the
that.
bathhouses. But they didn't do that because it would have interfered with their sexual revolution. So they got the
Yeah,
blood of hundreds of thousands of men on their
yeah.
hands, and they promulgated talk about a pandemic or an epidemic. They did nothing to to in any way mitigate that.
No. And
Really,
now Big Pharma just makes a fortune off some kind of medication that keeps these people, this group of people alive, 4 or 5
right?
years more or 10 years more. And they're so somehow saviors. What?
No, it's crazy. Anyway, so Judith, what is coming up for you in terms of research?
Well, I'm finishing this article, this on the connection between Rockefeller, the as an agent of change, and Kinsey working for the CIA. You know, just a second. Let me turn this
Sure, go
off.
ahead.
Whoops, off. I never had to do these things.
I like your ringtone.
So anyway, gotta
So,
go.
all right.
Gotta
So
go.
Kinsey and Rockefeller and their connections.
Yeah, and the impact of that on our country today, I think, is significant. And the role of all of this in Trump's inability, in terms of Trump's issues, primary role, because this has been sabotaged from the beginning, and the sabotage has continued.
Yes, indeed.
So we're trying to get that out. There's going to be a conference October 3rd to try and start defunding the Kinsey Institute. Finally, we have some legislators interested, and yeah, so we're moving.
Good luck to that. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Judith Reisman. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor to talk to you.
Pleasure
And
and honor to talk with you, Chuck.
all right,
Always.
thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Cheerio.
All right.